Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Criterion Connection. I'm Wade.
And I'm Joe.
We're here to talk about a new release by Ridley Scott, Thelma and Louise, starring Susan Sarandon, Gina Davis as the titular characters. Louise is a struggling, played by Susan Sarandon, is a struggling waitress. And Gina Davis is unfulfilled wife that's being bullied by her husband, played by Shooter McGavin, Christopher McDonald.
Yeah, she's, I guess you would call her a homemaker.
Yeah.
Married to the assistant regional manager of a furniture store.
Yes.
This is a pretty well-known movie. I feel like a lot of people probably have seen this at some point.
Probably Ridley Scott's more straightforward movie.
It's a very straightforward movie. It's not even. It's even like not like an extravagant movie. Like Ridley really loves to do a lot of cool visuals.
Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Alien.
But this one is pretty like just kind of straightforward and
Keeps going.
Yeah. And we've got Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis as Louise and Thelma, respectively. And both of them were nominated for the Best Actress Oscar, which they lost, unfortunately, to Jodie Foster with Silence of the Lambs. What a hell of a year, though.
And also, we've done Silence of the Lambs, which you can check it on our archives.
Yep. And so what we end up, I think what's teased here is that this is largely a picture that's driven, no pun intended, by Thelma and Louise and their actors and their performances. That is kind of the main. That's the meat of this sandwich of a movie.
It's them. It's mostly them. You'll get some side characters here and there, like Michael Madsen, who plays Jimmy.
Yep.
And Brad Pitt, who plays JD.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, Harvey Keitel plays a cop. Wow, Shocker, he plays a cop.
And his name's Hal.
Yeah. It's basically they go on a vacation, and it doesn't end well, and they're on the lam. They're on the run with the law.
Yeah, so they're just trying to take a break from their neglecting and fairly abusive situations at home. Wanted to go fishing and have a fun time, and then things just kind of spiral out of control. Gina Davis plays a friendly and fairly naive woman, whereas Susan Sarandon, Louise, plays a much more worldly and experienced character who's trying to look out for, Thelma and they both try and convince each other to leave their respective partners, but it seems like Louise is kind of more like, this is kind of how it is, whereas Thelma is kind of more naive and doesn't really know what's going on, and is very trusting, as we find out in one of the opening kind of sequences that kind of kicks off your first act.
And she pretty much remains trusting throughout.
Yeah.
Even if to the detriment of them.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you, JD. And also they kind of they grow as characters. Like Thelma is not really a doormat near the end.
No, far from it.
She's actually taken the role of the go-getter, which was what Louise was, and Louise is more of more self-reflective, a little more not cold and hard-edged.
Yeah.
And of course it's just. It's hard to really talk about the movie without it's just them trying to drive to Mexico, and that's the movie.
Yeah, it's very I feel like it's almost a lot like Blood Simple in a way.
Yes,
without all the crazy twists and turns. This is more of oh no, something happened, and they had to make a decision, and
another decision.
Yeah, and the decision they make ultimately ends up not being the best one. depending on how you look at it. But yeah, this is a big one from the early '90s, and it shows two lead female characters. It has these undertones of like, this is considered, I think, a fairly big budget, like Hollywood, like feminist movie for the time.
Yeah, Gina Davis is like kind of the reflective of the nuclear family idea of like, oh, she's the homewrecker, the homemaker.
Yeah.
And this one is the struggling waitress. Like neither of them are empowered at all.
Right.
And then they become empowered. They basically say F you to the law, pretty much.
Yeah, and they ultimately decide to kind of take the situation into their own hands, because that's kind of, they keep getting boxed in the corners, and they react, and then by the end of the movie, it's them taking action, which is kind of part of your character arc there.
Intense, like final act.
Yeah,
of the car chase in the Grand Canyon, Arizona area. I think Grand Canyon's in Arizona, right?
Yes.
Yes, I remember geography sometimes.
Well, that's a big thing because of Louise will not go into Texas.
Yeah,
which is a great like subplot. It's talking around an issue and building a lot of backstory for her character. So they're trying to get to Mexico, but they can't. They're going from Oklahoma, and they want to get to Mexico, but she says they will not go into Texas. And that's kind of what ends up biting them in the end, of course.
Yeah.
But it's a very good movie. I enjoyed it.
The ending, I only knew. This is the first time watching this movie. The ending I know from Wayne's World 2. That's all I know it from. I also know I've discovered Laverne and Shirley through Wayne's World. It's fun. I learned a lot of things from Wayne's World, I realize. Yeah, it's a good movie. I mean, Ridley Scott did not shoehorn anything about unicorn dreams like he did with Blade Runner and the director's cut and stuff like that.
Oh, we haven't seen the director's cut of Thelma Louise.
This is true. We did not see this with the director's cut.
The music was pretty good too.
Oh yeah,
in a few of the like the big scenes, and then in the country western bar.
Yeah.
But it's very like, it's a very solid like Hollywood movie. Is how I would put it. So, would you recommend it?
Oh, we switched the roles. Usually, I'm the one asking. I would. I think it's like one. I wouldn't say it's like a classic like Godfather or Silence of the Lambs, which beat them. But I think it's worth watching. I do think the movie's a little tad too long. It's like a little over 2 hours. I think you could have crunched that up a little bit more to make it a little less. Because the first half flew by, but at some point, like it gets kind of like draggy.
I get it.
When they're in the desert, it gets really kind of draggy until the last act. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I'd recommend it to the general audience. It's on Prime. I watched it on Prime. It's also on Apple TV apparently. So, yeah. But you?
Yeah, I would. For those who hadn't seen it, I think it's very much worth watching. It's great. Like, it's one of those like powerful like dual lead performances. Everybody else who supports them is great. Like, Harvey Keitel as the detective who's like, hey, I think these ladies might have had something to do with it. And then all of a sudden, everybody who he talks to, they're like, there's no way. That's not what these ladies are like. And him finding out, like, oh, yeah, I think they did. And then trying to help them in the end.
Yeah.
Understanding kind of their situation and kind of where circumstances push them. And he's trying to stop the inevitable end from happening. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think it's a very solid movie, a very good movie. My biggest gripe is less of the pace, because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that kind of warrants it. It's that slow, like you do cut away to the detective and it's him kind of piecing things together. But I feel like the iconic ending is kind of weird for me, because I'm not sure if I feel like the decision at the very end was kind of...
Maybe they jumped to it.
Yeah, I think it's a...
It's a very dramatic decision.
It's a very dramatic decision that there were... I don't know if they've exhausted all the options at that point.
Harvey Keitel looked like he was very, probably work on getting them a deal, right?
I think
for the first act, not the acts afterwards.
Well, if you think about it, you could interpret it as him also trying to manipulate these women and them refusing to be manipulated.
It's true.
So, I mean, there is that kind of idea.
They just kept going.
But yeah, it's not like it's bad. It's iconic. It's a really cool ending.
Yeah.
But
when you want to jump into a big old montage at the end,
I'm just like, I don't know how earned it is.
That's fair.
Like, I feel like they could have gotten a couple more steps in there to
a little more desperation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do agree. It's just iconic. I mean, I don't want to go to say I don't understand the meaning because we're two schlubby dudes on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say, it's empowering. It's like after you to the wall even more. But yeah, that's our thoughts on Thelma and Louise. Let us know in the comments section below what you think about the film. Do you think it's earned? Tell us how wrong we are and how the ending is earned. You can like, subscribe, share, and do all that stuff on YouTube. Please help support us more. You want to keep going?
Let's keep going.
I'm Wade.
And I'm Joe.
I'm going to keep going.
Hit it.